Do you want to know more about people's journeys and understand how they take decisions in their day-to-day lives? Tune in to the Nails and Hammers podcast to master from what others have already figured out in life. In this episode, we are excited to have Nupur Dave, who is a seasoned product manager, an NRI consultant, and the author of Back Home and the Lessons Learned by Miss Pecking. Hi Nupur, welcome to the Nails and Hammers podcast.
Thank you.
A lot of our friends are, in the US are excited about this episode, especially when I told them that you are coming.
Thank you for that.
And we want to start from the very beginning. Can you share a bit with us about where did you grow up and where all did you do your schooling from?
Yeah, so my background is a little interesting. I'm a Gujarati, but I've never been to Gujarat. And
Oh.
I grew up in Maharashtra. I could call myself a Maharashtrian at heart. And growing up in Pune was very interesting because Pune is a very sheltered sort of place. You don't really have to deal with the big bad evil world. So I basically grew up in the same area that my grandfather, he was in the army and he settled in Pune. And so this area, the college that I went to was the same college that my dad went to. Nauroji Warrior College, and then I did my engineering from College of Engineering Pune, which also my dad went to in the
Oh, wow.
60s. So it's a sort of legacy of sorts. And right after my graduation, I had decided to pursue my master's degree from the United States. So I moved out of Pune at the age of 22. And I spent more than 13 years in the US before I moved
Yeah.
back to India. So
Right.
that's the long and short of it.
Got it. So straight out of your college, I think after your postgrad, you pretty much started working with Google, right? And when this was back in the day in 2007, when Google was not what it is today, right? So how was the experience working with them, and like you worked with them for 10 odd years, right? So how was the journey like?
It was very interesting, especially for me, because I didn't join in the headquarters. I joined in a very interesting part of Google, which was the data center. And
Okay.
at that time, these data centers were top secret locations. You
Right,
don't want
right.
even your competitors to know. You wouldn't find it on Google Maps. So
Mhm.
my friends would tease me saying that we'll follow you to office one day because we tell them where I work.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
these are physical, like you imagine a very, very, very large warehouse. You
Mhm,
walk in and there are just rows and rows and rows of machines.
Yeah.
And it kind of felt like, working in like a Star Wars movie or something like that, because this was
Right.
cutting edge technology.
Right.
And so I started in that as a forecasting and demand planning analyst. And then this was in Atlanta.
Nice.
So I soon, my personal life in Atlanta, I got so bored of it. By then I had been 5 or 6 years in Atlanta. And when you're that long in a city that is the size of Atlanta, it starts becoming smaller in your mind. You're like, been there, done that, seen everything. And I
Yeah,
really
yeah.
wanted to move to California.
And
There
then
was this
did you live in downtown or did you live in suburbs in Atlanta?
Oh, in Atlanta, so that's one thing that a lot of I feel I made a mistake, which was I had decided initially that I want to live closer to office,
Okay.
and I feel that especially in the United States, people really need to prioritize how they want to live their life, as opposed to designing a life around their workplace. So what I should have done more, which I did towards the end, was live in downtown Atlanta and commute to work. It was totally
Right.
worth it because downtowns in the United States offer a very different quality of life than suburbs.
But then just digressing a bit, how do you justify, staying away from office for 5 days and like having, a 2 hour commute every day for personal life? I mean, that's always a debate that most people have.
So here's where I don't know if you should call it the elitism that comes. So Google
Yeah.
provided Wi-Fi enabled buses to its employees. So I
Right.
actually had a very productive 2 hours because I just had to sit in the bus, open my laptop and do whatever I needed to do for 2 hours and get it out of the way. So that really that helped. There are a lot of other options. People who take the Caltrain, assume you get a place to sit, you can do the same thing. You can open your laptop and do, and you really don't need internet to be productive. To be honest, if you're writing something, you're writing down your ideas. You just need a piece of pen and paper. You don't even need a computer.
And Google, you work for 10 odd years, right? So I'm assuming that you've worked in different roles as well, right? So how was that, and what were any specific products of Google that you worked on?
Yeah, so my background is mostly in infrastructure, which is like the hidden part of many companies, not just Google. This you would see in Microsoft Azure. Any company that has a very, very large data center presence will have a back-end operation. So I was initially in hardware, where I was forecasting for demand planning for spare parts for the machines that were in the warehouse, in the data center warehouse. And when I moved to Mountain View, which is the headquarters of Google, it opened up a sea of opportunities for me. Now, you could argue, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Is it a good thing to have so many opportunities? Because when you have so much choice, it becomes even more confusing. You can expand the debate to the generalist versus specialist question as well. Is it better to be a specialist or a generalist? So just for the viewers or the listeners, I am what we would call a generalist, which means you can fit me anywhere. I have a skill set that is very transferable. The only problem with this is then you don't carry your domain knowledge with you everywhere. So with the domain knowledge of hardware, I went to the network operations side, and network operations is very interesting because in Google, everything was built from scratch for Google within Google. So these are not terminologies that if I spoke to a networking professional outside of Google, they would be like, what are you talking about? So these were very specific homegrown technologies that I worked on. And to talk about the 10-year piece, there were a lot of opportunities that came across my way. And then towards 2016, which was my 9th year with Google, I increasingly felt I need to move to India. And I did a role transfer from the US to India. Now, to answer your question about what roles have changed, the titles may have changed, the teams may have changed, but the essence of it sort of remains the same, which is, the technical program management piece, which is your understanding what a company needs to move a certain project forward, and you go ahead and do it. You're responsible for delivering that particular project or projects.
And I could relate to your when you said that when you moved to Mountain View, you had so many choices. I just read a book called Paradox of Choice, and it basically argues the same thing. Like when there's too many choices, does not necessarily make you happier.
It in fact makes you question yourself, because you're like, should I have done that? Should I have instead tried this other role in this other team, or maybe I should have left and got an MBA or something like that. And these are questions that even come after looking at your peers, because when you look at someone else and you see their path and you think that, wow, this person is so successful, maybe I should have done what they did. Maybe I should have taken the GMAT and gotten into Harvard, Stanford, or something like that. These questions start plaguing you, and at some point you just have to make peace with what you have achieved. And I think you don't just make peace by sitting, it's in Hindi we say haath pe haath dhare baithe. You just don't say, okay, I'm at peace. The whole idea to being happier is to make progress. So there was a point, and I'll talk a little bit about my book journey after in some time, but that was the reason why I started looking at my career, and I asked myself, where am I making progress? Because just being busy or doing something is not really helping you feel content. And the only way forward, I feel, is you pick a certain topic or something that you really, really love to do and make progress in that. It could be joining a course, it could be doing some daily yoga or some daily writing, but I think that is the key to making
Right.
yourself more relevant in today's
Right,
times.
right, right. The paradox of choices, I mean, the topic that we discussed, it usually happens early in your early 20s, right? But is it the same that, I mean, when you're in your 30s as well, you go through that similar cycle? Because in your early 20s, I mean, just starting a career, there are a bunch of things that you can jump on and switch and stuff, right? But in your 30s, I mean, you've already worked for quite some time right now, right? So from that perspective, what's your take?
Absolutely. In fact, it gets worse, I think, because you become wiser and then you
Okay.
see chances.
Right.
When you're in your 20s, like I was super stupid. I would just jump into things without
Yeah,
thinking.
exactly.
Yeah.
So so a lot of things are people I see are very confused, especially when they are not in tune with what they want to do versus what they're doing. And
Mhm,
that's
mhm.
where the questions start coming up. And this is where you really have to listen to your gut. And I'd love to tell you a little story about how to follow your gut.
Yeah,
Bec-
please.
Sure.
So when I applied for my master's degree, I
Mhm,
applied to a lot of schools,
mhm.
and for industrial engineering, Georgia Tech was number one in the
The
world.
best in the world, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I applied there. I got through, and I also got through Virginia Tech. Now, my dad, at those times, he was thinking more from a very protective point of view, and he said, "See, Virginia Tech is close to your aunts, so
Mhm.
you should go there." And I was like, no, Georgia Tech is number one, and we
Yeah.
couldn't find the finances for it at that time. You know how
Yeah.
typical middle class Indian
Yeah.
households are. You can barely pay for the flight
Yeah.
ticket.
Yeah.
So I did go to Virginia Tech, and at the bottom of my heart, I just knew that place is not for me. And my gut kept telling me, do
Mhm.
something about Georgia Tech, do something about Georgia Tech. Luckily, I had deferred my admit to spring, but how do you just go and join a university? So I literally, on one Thanksgiving weekend, was asking people around, and there were these two Indian guys who were going to Atlanta. Now, Virginia Tech is in a small village town, about 4 hours from Washington, D.C. And this, in my mind, mentally, it literally felt like I was standing on the road and I asked for a lift. So I asked those guys, can you give me a lift to Atlanta? And I just didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that this is something I need to pursue. So I went with them to Atlanta. They dropped me off fortunately, I had a friend there. And we went and met the current students of industrial engineering. And what I did, I said, show me your notebook. And the minute they opened their notebook, I don't know what happened to me, but I said, this is it. This is for me. This is where I want to be. And I didn't know how I'll get the finances. I didn't know how I'm going to even physically get there. So I took a Greyhound bus back. And if you all know how Greyhound is very creepy,
Yeah,
very
Yeah.
smells of drugs. And I somehow made it happen with the limited finances. And at that time I was working in a dishwashing
yeah.
place because
Mhm,
as a
mhm.
student, and with all that limited resources, there's no cell phone time. Like, this was the old kind of cell phone, not the smartphone era. And I made it happen because my gut told me that this is the right thing for me. And I feel like everyone needs to listen to that voice inside which keeps banging on their head and saying, this is not for you, this is not for you. And that can manifest in different ways. It could manifest as some people coming to office every day and being like, yeah, I just don't feel like doing this. I feel that you really need to listen to that voice and
Mhm.
push yourself to find what is it that does work for me, which is in tune with what
Yeah.
I am as a person. So,
Yeah.
That's quite interesting. I mean, I don't have a exactly similar story, but my aunt stays in Atlanta and my parents were like, go to Georgia Tech, go to Georgia Tech. I did not apply to Georgia Tech and I went to University of Washington because I felt this was right for me.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, see, we all have these stories and we just don't know that it is our gut talking to us and we just have to listen to it.
Yeah, exactly. And then, like, speaking about your, I mean, you mentioned that your career has fairly been in this domain of technical program management or product management. So it's one of the, the hot jobs of the decade. So how did you make that transition from an infra, maybe an engineer, to a program manager or a product manager?
There's a lot of combination of happenstance the environment, the opportunities you get. But to answer the question, for someone who's looking for the transition, you have to get that one opportunity. You just need one opportunity where maybe somebody who has faith in you, or maybe you're in a company where suddenly a certain role comes up and you're like, can I just do like 20%, a 20% project in this?
Yeah.
And then you slowly get your way into it. And this is not the type of job that you would do, somebody would hire you right out of college. I have seen a lot of people do MBAs for that.
Yeah.
I have a divided opinion on this. I feel that it's a bit unfortunate that the industry itself looks for MBAs
Right.
to fill up product manager positions. So until that changes,
Yeah.
and if you have the luxury of doing an MBA, you should. But don't be disheartened if you don't have that typical background that other people do. It's again looking at your gut and feeling like this is the right thing for me. I'm just going to pursue it with single-minded
I was
focus.
saying that we are going to call this episode as going by the gut, because like discussing the same again and again.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
nice.
even to give another example of gut is I didn't get into Google right after my Georgia Tech degree. I got into a very small company that was the only one willing to sponsor my H1B.
Mhm.
And you know how, for those who've been abroad, they know how desperate you are. Like, just do something, give me that job, that sponsor, H1.
Yeah.
I don't care. Like, I will sweep the floor for you. so yeah, a lot of times that when I was in that company, I just loved I loved statistics. Like, I loved data analysis, and I kept being like, I want something in data analysis. I want something in data analysis. I ended up getting what I wanted at that time, and that was because of that gut feeling which told me this is not enough. What I have right now. I need something more, and I'm going to continue to find it till it comes into my lap. So you have to keep those channels open.
Nice.
Listen to your inner voice. Would like to know more about what was your typical day like in SF?
I can give you a work day and a weekend, and this answer will be very specific to me because I like this life, and it's kind of funny when I talk to you about my shopping escapades. So in a weekday, it was quite hectic actually. So I would wake up at 6:30. I had mastered this 12-minute routine. It takes me 12 minutes, start to finish, to get ready, because that's the luxury of time that I had. So if you imagine you're waking up at 6:30, and by the time I get to office, it's 8:30. You catch your breakfast, you get your latte or whatever, and since we were infrastructure, our meeting started at 9 a.m. It's
And
not
also,
the 11.
just to add, you had free breakfast, free lunch, and free dinner at work.
Yeah. Oh, and we still complained about it, by the way. So yeah, you go to the barista and you give your order, and it takes 10 minutes for the latte to get made. Like, that is too long. Free latte with a barista. So yeah, I was the head of the Indian Google network at Google. So I used to do a lot of activities related to that as well. The clock strikes 5:30. I would go to the gym. I was super diligent about that because there's something about the US that just made me feel like I have to be at my fittest and slimmest best. And now when I look back at that life, I was like, I was so stressed about the gym. It's not worth it. But that's the environment I was living in. So I conformed to what that environment made me do. And by 7 o'clock, I would take the free dinner, pack it up, sit in the bus, get home by 9 o'clock. Now, just look at this day, right? You're waking up at 6:30, you get home at 9, and then you do other things at 9. You either clean the house or you talk to your parents or do something. And by the time you're getting to sleep, it's like 12 or 1 a.m.
Yeah.
And if you calculate, it's a total of 5 hours of sleep. And this means that your life is perpetually on coffee.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the sacrifices, yes, that I had to make while being in San Francisco. And one of the problems with the commute is that some people can sleep in the bus. I couldn't. So that's a choice I made. was a
Right.
but people they decide to live near their houses so that they get 8 hours sleep. I decided I want to experience life, and I stayed away. And of course, weekends were there's so much to explore in San Francisco, especially if you're living in a city like that. You don't have to plan anything. You can just walk downstairs and do your 7 a.m. run. You can
Yeah.
even run 2 in the afternoon if you want to. So a lot of uh, there was a lot of opportunities to do shopping, which I really loved. I think literally everything
Right.
you can see in the background here, like including the
Uh-huh.
desk, bookmark, the plant. This is everything is from the US.
Oh wow.
So huge fan of shopping at that time, and my shopping in India is zero.
Oh.
Oh.
So yeah, so that was basically the San Francisco life,
Okay.
for me. Yeah.
You also mentioned that you joined the Indian Googlers network. So what was that about? What all activities did you do? And I think you also started a cricket team there. So what was that about?
The Indian Google network gave me a platform to express myself more than anything else. And I was so enthusiastic to get the community together. I planned a lot of things. So for 15th August, we used to have some kind of mela where people would do dances. And I thought that why don't we introduce Indian sports here? So we started doing Kho and Kabaddi
Right.
in that, and it was so well received. A lot of people showed up, and also with the Indian Google network, we got a budget to plan Diwali, and Diwali at Google was like a 4,000 strong party where people would kill to get in, to get a wristband for that. And I planned that for a couple of years. I also love sports, so I saw the need for a women's specific sports, and what's better than cricket. So I got together a cricket team, got a budget for it. But it was a great experience, and I also got a chance to host Prime Minister Modi's visit to the Google campus and his team.
Oh,
So
wow.
I met a lot of his OSDs and even the Secret Service equivalent of the Indian side. So that
Right.
was a very, very unique, interesting experience. I got to meet a lot of journalists, a lot of these big news channels that interviewed me. So it was a once in a lifetime experience. As I mentioned, a platform for me to express myself.
Nice.
So, sounds super interesting. But let's talk about your coming back to India journey, right? So, what was the pivotal moment that you decided that you want to come to India again? And what was the thought process like? Was there a framework that you worked on, or is it like with again going with the gut feeling?
So, this return to India side, gut feeling doesn't work as much, in the sense you know you want to go, but it doesn't
Yeah.
push you to make it happen.
Yeah.
You need something more. And
Right.
for me, it was what I would say, I don't know, maybe death by a thousand cuts, where every day small things started making me work, me make up my mind to move back to India. For some people it could be one incident that happens. A lot of people, some lose their jobs or their visa issues. I didn't have any of that, and I always knew I wanted to move back, but it's that time never comes. You're always like, okay, maybe next year. But I think this whole part about that managing my life in the US, which I described to you, was so stressful. I think that just came to a tipping point where I said, you know what, I have lived my life in the US to the best possible. I'm at my peak here. I have explored so much. It's time I would call it moving on. You move on, you actively decide, I'm going to move away from this and try a new life somewhere else.
Yeah.
So that is the decision that I made. And once I made that decision, I booked that flight. Things were so much better, like so much more calmer. I felt so much better, and I think it was a great decision. I really feel that I have changed as a person after moving back to India.
That's quite interesting. And I mean, like, just adding on to the return to India part. So, I mean, being a Gujju myself, whenever, I mean, someone says that, hey, I want to go to India sometime in the future. First of all, people say that's never going to happen. Secondly, when someone says that, no, I really want to go, people would say you have lost your mind. So why do people say these things, and then how did you overcome those questions
Yeah,
yourself?
so this is the thing. Why are we looking for answers in other people when the answer lies in us? So
Yeah.
asking other people, they are going to project what they think you should be doing. And in my book, I will show you, this is a book that I've
Yeah.
written.
Yeah. We'll talk about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've spoken
Yeah.
about this thing called Tumse Na Ho Paega.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where if you meet somebody and they say, hey, I'm studying for IIT, you think isse nahi ho paega. It's like kind of similar. I don't think you're going to survive in India, and that's not true. You can't decide how other people are going to be in India and what's going to make them stick or make them happy here.
Right.
So yeah, the idea is, again, when you listen to what your stomach is saying, that gut, which is literally that feeling inside
Yeah.
you,
Yeah. Yeah.
whatever other people say will not matter.
It's
Like
all noise. Yeah.
it's noise. Like don't talk to people. Like there was
Yeah.
this guy, I remember, some random guy I met on a hike, and I said I'm going to India, and he's like, okay, we'll see how long you last. And
Exactly. People like are so smug faced.
yeah.
Yeah.
See, another thing about moving to India is, right, people project their insecurities on you, and I don't blame them. They like, I wasn't successful in doing this. Why should you be successful in doing this?
Yeah.
And that sort of gets projected in their thoughts and what they say, and you can't let that take you down. You know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So now that you're in India, what was the first thing that you did after coming to India?
So I moved with my job with Google itself, and
Yeah.
then I got an opportunity to work with the government of India. So I left Google to join the government of India, and I worked on multiple projects. It was a 6-month contract, and so I did that. And after that, I again, gut feeling, I want to write, I want to write. So I decided to take a break and write my first book. And then I dabbled around a little bit here and there. I did some kind of on the ground survey for elections in Madhya
Okay.
Pradesh, and that was great because I got a chance to visit so many villages, more than 200 villages, and talk to the villagers there. And after that, I realized, okay, I've done a lot of my exploring India. So it was time to write my second book and also get a job at the same time. So then I moved back into the corporate world.
Okay. So then, what were the books about? What was the process of writing about, and then how did you overcome the writer's block?
Yeah. So here's the thing: there are so many topics that so many people can write about. I'm sure if between the two of you, we'll be able to get a list of 10 topics that you can write a book about. So the question is, what is the topic that is bugging you the most? What do you feel most charged by? You start with that. And for me, the journey was a little different because I know I want to write more. So I felt like if I want someone to take me seriously, I have to already have written a book.
Okay.
So I wrote my first book. I wrote this book, and then when I went to write this book, I could say that, hey, I've already written one book. So people take you seriously. Yeah, the process was that I've written a whole blog post on it, so I won't go into too much details. But the idea is that you start with your chapter outlines. You think about, if I would tell a layman, what are your frequently asked questions, your FAQs? Just write down, say, do you want to tell what topic you're passionate about? Maybe Kunal or any topic.
Yeah, I mean, let's
Sports in general or quizzing. We discuss about quizzing a lot.
Yeah, okay, let's take quizzing. Great.
Yeah.
Think about what are the questions that we could ask about quizzing. Like, maybe one question is Kaun Banega Crorepati a true style of quizzing? Because you have four questions to choose from.
Yeah.
So that could be a question. Then you start writing an answer.
Right.
and you
Right.
just find that you will
Yeah.
keep writing,
Yeah.
you'll just keep expanding, and then
Yeah.
you take 20-30 such questions, that
Yeah.
becomes your book. Simple. So that is a very
Yeah.
simplistic approach.
Yeah. I'm sure it's not that simple.
Yeah, I mean, it gets complicated,
Yeah.
especially for me, which was the logic, where,
Right.
um, say, for example, you want to talk about gender problems in quizzing.
Yeah.
Should you put a separate chapter for that, or should
Mhm.
you put a little story in every chapter, or should you not talk about it altogether? So that kind of thing was very difficult for me to come up with, and the only thing you have to do is just keep writing. You have to be a little obsessed about it. I was just like waking up at 2 in the morning and scribbling notes and going back to sleep. It's kind of
Right.
like
Right.
all-consuming.
Real obsession. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and
was it like a routine, or was it like something that would wake you up?
was it
I
oh
mean, was it
yeah, it was, yeah, it was something that would wake you up, because the thing with the creative process is that you don't know when it's going to hit you. And a
Mhm.
lot of time, there are some books on this where the time before you're going to sleep, when you're drifting into sleep, is when your best ideas start coming in. I've
Right.
literally had full stories go through my mind while I'm drifting to sleep, and I know if I don't jot it down now, I will never remember it again in that sequence.
Right. Right.
You
Right.
have to do a lot of that to get some good
Yeah.
quality
Uh-huh.
work out. Anyone can write a book, but you want quality sentences, you're going to
Right.
have to work a little more on that.
Right.
I have taken a lot of courses as well on creative writing from Stanford University. So I've been working on the process on developing my skills for a very long time. It just it was that point where I was like, I need to make some big progress in my life, and that's when I decided to start writing the book.
Right. Right. Right.
It's
And
going to
also, it's
be
one of those books which will actually create an impact on somebody, right? Which is. I mean, as a writer, I'm assuming this is like a lovely feeling in general, right?
you hit the nail on the head. It's what I live for. Literally every week, I get 3 to 4 messages on an average where people are like, "Your book has changed my life. I
Right.
related to it."
Yeah.
I've get so many messages on LinkedIn, and these are people I don't know. My friends didn't buy the book, and that's one thing about writers, that
Yeah.
a lot of writers
Yeah.
have to internalize, is that your own family and friends are not going to read your book.
Right.
It
Right.
is
Right.
your target audience. They
Yeah.
will pick
Yeah.
up. So the reviews are good, and even my consulting, right? Like I consult
Yeah.
NRIs on whether they
Mhm.
will back, and every session is so different. Everyone has a different problem. They'll come to your home. If you're sick, they'll call you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the thing is that once you get friendly with people, the switching gears is a little difficult, because you're laughing and joking, and then you're like, okay, let's talk about work, and and then they're like, why are you suddenly getting serious? And giving for feedback is also more difficult when you get friendly with people, because then you have to be a little softer on your feedback. And the thing is, people don't remember the feedback, they remember the person who gave the feedback.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was very, very difficult for me to also I come from a place where I will challenge my boss. If I feel that there is something that I need to say, I will say it. I'm not a yes man, and I found it a little difficult to do that in different other environments.
Right.
But in this company, I think they're as close to the US culture, with the
Yeah.
Indian, the caring part,
Yeah.
where people call you up when you're sick.
Right. Right.
So I've got lucky to find this team and opportunity.
That's interesting. I'm 100% sure you won't get Wi-Fi enabled fancy buses in India.
You know what? You move on from those things. You start
Yeah.
looking at what other things India is giving you,
Yeah.
or whatever opportunity. It doesn't have to be India. Maybe you move from New York to San Diego, and
Mhm.
you have to see. You have to be in what your current situation is giving you, and take the most of it. I don't miss it, to be honest. I mean, I do miss shopping. I really, really miss shopping. But do
Yeah.
I miss Wi-Fi? Okay, there was a time
Yeah.
when it was cool, and
Yeah.
you know, um,
Yeah.
वो भाव मिलता है, as we call it.
Yeah. Yeah.
तो अभी इतना
Fair
भाव
enough.
नहीं मिलता है, but
Yeah.
that's fine, you know.
Adding to the bhav part, I mean, why do people still wear their fang swag all around? Like all they wear is their fang swag.
I have an answer for that. And the reason is because it's probably the only t-shirts they have. And I'm not even kidding. You open my drawer right now, all my t-shirts are Google t-shirts. Because I don't need to buy any other. And then what do I wear? Those are the only shirts that I can wear. So yeah, there is a bit of, you know, the showing thing. Because again, people take you more seriously than they would if you weren't wearing that. But that's a very individual sort of thing. Like I keep it close to me. I don't tell people about my fang experience, but there are people who you know, for them that's the way they get noticed in the world. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, you mentioned that you are a generalist. So, like, in general, are startups better for a generalist like yourself?
that's a great question. I think it depends. What I do feel is that it is helping me becoming a specialist in the sense that I'm doing so many different things that I start understanding more of what I like versus I don't like. It's making me get more technical, which you can't do much if you're in a very large company. So it's also helping me learn a certain domain in depth. So I feel like with this experience of being in a niche domain, can really help me if I choose to go down this path. But that's the thing, right? Like today it's fintech. If I choose to, I can pull myself out and plug myself back into infra or whatever. So you know, it always helps getting more domain knowledge. But and a startup definitely helps you learn the weeds of things. But startups may not be for everyone. You know, you have to put in a lot of your time. You have to be always available, and it depends on the phase of life you are in. It may be the answer, maybe it's not the answer.
Yeah,
absolutely. So, how's the overall experience coming since you moved back to India?
Overall, it's been great. I do want to, you know, for people who are seeing this, you don't have to stay in India forever. And that's what I keep telling people. Like, I've written a book on moving back, and the essence of my book, which if people don't read it, they assume I'm telling people to move. I'm saying it's a phase of your life. You come to India, enjoy yourself, do whatever you want. And when you feel like, if you feel like leaving India and going back to wherever you are, do it. So tomorrow, if I want to go and explore New York, that's one city in the world I would love to live in. I'm going to do it if I want to. Without, I mean, I'm not going to do it but if the opportunity arises and if I want to, I am open to that. And it doesn't mean that I'm unhappy here. It just means that in a different phase of my life, I want different things. And that's what people have to understand. Like oh, I'm so happy here is not necessarily going to be your answer. And it's not like I'm happy all the time, right? Like there are so many things that I don't want to deal with. Like I don't want to deal with you know I just mitigate all the things that I don't want to deal with. So so yeah, it's good. I feel like my personality has changed after moving back. I feel more grounded, less stressed, and yeah, more sort of grown up. Like there are real problems here. You know, it's not like you know, there is bumper to bumper traffic on whatever boulevard in Sunnyvale, and that's the biggest problem of the day. Like it's not like that.
I mean, so my ex-manager was a 14-year-old Google veteran, and he mentioned something about an email thread which is called Zero Earth World Problem. And there was this thread which was like, should bananas heads be chopped off or not? And people were discussing about that.
Yeah. So Google, where you don't have, if you don't have other problems, you will start making up your problems. And that's something that we explored in my book, which is you have real problems here. Like
Yeah.
You won't get water for a day. Like, will you be worried about like somebody? I remember someone complained that she got her hair braided and or cut, and someone asked her at office in Mountain View, "Hey, you cut your hair," and she was so offended by that.
Oh.
And I mean, if you're gonna be so sensitive, how do you live? Like anything will piss you off, and your coworkers won't know what to talk to you, and that's what's happening in that environment. Is that it's very hard to talk to anyone because you don't know what they'll get offended with.
Fair enough.
So,
And just wrapping up, what advice would you give to a 22-year-old Nupur who is leaving Pune to go to the US?
oh, so here's the thing: some topic that I haven't brought up before. Spend the money.
More
I
shopping.
think, no, I think more around living a good life or at least decent life. And of course, when you're 22 and you're going to the US to study, you don't have money, and you end up eating cereal and bread and something cheap every day. Like it's cereal and bread and banana, cereal, bread, banana. And that's fine as a student life. But once you start earning, and especially if you're in the US, spend the money. Like spend the money on that dinner with your friend, or spend money on hiring a taxi to go somewhere on your own convenience, and don't be conjuice, which is what a lot of NRIs do.
And then
Invest in a bed or some good furniture.
I could totally relate because coming from a middle class family, it's so difficult to spend. You're not tuned to spend. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the Walmart में वो जो plastic वाला you get that container, right?
it's still
Like
there.
you always live like a nomad. Like I always was living as if I have to $20, $30 max. Well, why not? Why not spend? Get something, even if it was for 2 years, sell it off, and then start from scratch again if you're moving. It's so hard to do. I wish I had that wisdom of having spend money and have fewer friends. Don't make too many. I made too many friends. I think I was just diaspora immigrant life where your friends are your family. I think that should be sort of contained a little.
Oh.
Well, Nupur, that's a first. I think we've asked this question to a lot of people, and people end up saying that go with the flow, don't think too much about it and stuff. I think yours is, I think, by far the one of the best advices that we've got. And
I have one more thing. The biggest lie I have heard is to be yourself. Don't be yourself. Especially because if you're being an idiot, nobody's going to tell you.
Yeah.
So the advice is be a businesswoman, especially for women, right? Be that businesswoman when you go to office. Don't be yourself. And I made that mistake for a long part of my life. Please don't make that mistake. Like be the best of you for that appropriate situation. You don't have to be yourself all the time.
That's absolutely an golden advice, honestly. Because I mean, you have to switch your context. You're in a different environment, a different setup, right? And people will take you seriously if you have that switch, right? Versus just be who you are pretty much all the time, right?
Exactly. Indians, we are usually people pleasers, so we have to put on different hats consciously. Okay,
let's move to the final section. So this is rapid fire questions. So whatever comes to your mind, just go for it, right? So the first question is SF versus Bangalore.
SF.
Consulting, writing, or product management?
Writing.
Any interesting hobby that you picked during COVID? During this phase of working from home?
So many hobbies. I have actively decided to reduce my hobbies. So this question is for the wrong person.
Any hobby that you picked again? I mean, might have dropped it in the last few years.
No, I as I said, for me, my problem is that I do too much. So I have to actively stop myself from doing more so that I can focus on a few things. So yes.
Nice. I mean, you answered it before, but like if you have to give a one-word answer, working in India versus US?
US, any day. Wow. It's a great experience.
I was actually going through your blog and you mentioned that you have a huge fascination for the American breakfast, right? So American breakfast versus the hardcore kuchu breakfast.
Oh, American breakfast. Oh my God. Like, imagine you go for a run and then you go to like a Hobbies or something and you have that a latte with a Spanish omelette and oh my God, like your mouth is watering. Any day American breakfast.
I mean, I don't consume eggs, and then I have to go for the scrambled tofu and everything, and then that sucks.
चलेगा वो चलेगा.
Yeah. And that's the end of our conversation, Nupur. It was really fun. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for interviewing me. I really enjoyed this experience.